Coming up next on Insights on PBS Hawaii, how would Hawaii's economy survive with a downsized military? Aloha and welcome to Insights. I'm Malia Mattoch, your host for tonight's show. Two of Oahu's Army bases are being targeted for possible downsizing over the next 5 years. The Army's most extreme projections anticipate a loss of nearly 20,000 soldiers and civilians from Schofield Barracks and Fort Shafter. Add to that another 30,000 family members, and Oahu stands to lose roughly 5% of its population, according to the Chamber of Commerce Hawaii. Economists say the state could lose about $1.3 billion in income and another $9 million in sales receipts, causing businesses that cater to the military to worry about huge losses. However, some who support the downsizing suggest it would alleviate traffic congestion and open up the housing market. Tonight, how would Hawaii's economy survive with a downsized military? We'd like to hear your thoughts on this important issue, so please call, email, or tweet your questions and comments. Now to our panel. Representative Marcus Oshiro has served in the State House since 1995. His district includes Wahiawa and Whitmore Village, an area that would be particularly impacted by downsizing at Schofield Barracks. Representative Kaniela Ing has represented South Maui since 2012. He is chairman of the House Committee on Ocean, Marine Resources, and Hawaiian Affairs. Recently, he was the only state lawmaker to speak in support of military downsizing. Al Frenzel is a retired U.S. Army colonel who has lived in Hawaii for 40 years. He has published and taught about restructuring in the armed forces and heads the Oahu Council for Military Downsizing. Eugene Tian is the state economist at the Hawaii Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism, or DBED. His office conducts research on economic issues that affect our state and also produces short and long-term population and economic forecasts. Welcome, gentlemen, and thank you for joining us. Colonel, could we start with you? We heard in the introduction a lot of the potential economic downside. What would be the argument from the military standpoint or point of view about why downsizing in Hawaii would make sense?
Well, first of all, the listeners need to understand that the Army has to cut 100,000 to 130,000 amongst 19 states. That's because the Defense Department's mission changed, and the Army is going to pay the major bill for that. So if you want to look at where you would base your soldiers, in my opinion, you want to look at where is the best place where they can train, where can they deploy from the easiest and the cheapest, and where is it economical for them to be. And in all three of those categories, the Army can't train here because they don't have access to live fire ranges for their Stryker units. They can't deploy easily here because they don't have surface ships or aircraft, and as you know, it's expensive. It's just as expensive for them to be here. They have to bring in all of their equipment, all of their logistics, and they have to move their personnel back and forth every couple of years. So it's extremely expensive to be here, and this is not the right place for them to be.
Representative, for those in Hawaii who want them to stay, what have been the arguments to do so?
Well, I think, first of all, they're part and parcel of our local community. They've been here for over 100 years in my area of the island and the state. And if you're to lose, economic factor of $1.3 billion, that's a sizable amount that needs to be factored in, whether you support them leaving now or you're leaving, later down the road. That's one of the material facts that we need to consider. There's also the effect upon the local communities. I think Professor Bannister, economist at HPU, said it this way. He says everything from the H2 freeway from Leeward Community College up and through Haleiwa Town on the North Shore will be impacted. And all of those communities along the line for unforeseeable future will have devastating effect upon those communities economically and in their neighborhoods. So those are the things that we need to address as we look into, whether there's going to be a downsize of 20,000 or 10,000, and how we're going to make the adjustment to that.
Mr. Tian, has the state looked at those numbers and what it could mean?
Yeah, according to the number we have in the economic structure, the number one industry in the state is tourism, and the number two is federal government. The federal government consists of two parts. One is the military, and the second part is the civilians. The military actually is about 11% of the economy. And the other civilian, including DOE, energy, all the others, is about 3%. So the 11% is a big sector in the economy. So when we lose the military, I think if you are talking about 20,000, it's about 40% of the military forces. I think the Schofield and the first chapter altogether is about 21,000 military personnel, and including their dependents. I think it's a big number. And that means our economy need to restructure. So the number two industry is going to restructure. We need to find out something else to be the number two.
Representative Ng, you though argue that there are costs for Hawaii to having that large sector of military here. What are those costs?
Sure. Well, first of all, the military history in Hawaii goes way back, but we need to think about the cultural argument. We need to go back to 1893 with the Bayonet Constitution. But just thinking about the matter at hand with the economy, a lot of the economics and the studies are based on a 1997 RAND study, a very free market libertarian style argument, and it assumes that all these military personnel are living among the locals, shopping at the same supermarkets and places, but lots of times that's not really the case. There's a lot more isolation or almost segregation in our communities here, maybe not in Wahiawa. And if I was representing Wahiawa, I'd feel this too. I probably would have voted the other way. 20,000 people leaving Kihei would have been devastating. But I'm not. And the idea that we should all be unanimous as a body, as people were calling for, when the community clearly wasn't, I think is a bad idea. I think we need to represent that dissenting voice. And the fact of the matter is they don't pay income tax. It's basically state income tax. It's basically subsidized housing for these personnel. The per pupil costs per student in the state that we subsidize, the taxpayers, everyone in the state, is about $11,000 per student. Now there's 28,000 federal, which comes out to $308 million that could be back in the state coffers. Now, we need to look at that entirety of the economic picture. And $1.35 billion is what was stated. There's only a certain amount of money that flows throughout our economy. And any economics professor, any Econ 101 class teaches you need to see economic sunset, to see sunrise, to see new industries blossom. Some will have to fail. And that's $1.3 billion that could be used for anything else, for technology, for agriculture, manufacturing, a whole slew of entrepreneurial activities. And we've seen it throughout the history of Hawaii, from whaling to sandalwood. They've depleted that resource. We're reliant on outside powers. Sandalwood, reliant again, they depleted that resource. To the Big Five, to industrial agriculture. We got priced out by the rest of the world, and now with tourism, we're starting to see that too. As new democracies open up and there's more viable tropical places for people to go, we cannot focus squarely on military and tourism. If we kick the can down the road, it'll just be my kids dealing with this. And as a young lawmaker who's focused on the future, because 50 years from now I'll probably still be here, I need to diversify the economy, and we need to see, unfortunately, some industries sunset.
Let me go back to you, Mr. Tian, very quickly. The numbers that the representative was putting out in terms of those cost education, so does that square with your studies? Have you come to the same conclusion?
I think the number representative talking about is the state spending. But the federal government spending is the money coming from out of the state. And the number is about $20 billion for all the federal government spending into the state. About half of them, about $10 billion, is for the Department of Defense. But if we are saying about 40% reduction, so that is representing about $4 billion money. stop coming from the federal government.
All right, Colonel.
This is where I'd like to step in because the numbers aren't being adequately representative. And I listened to the Army, I've looked at the Army numbers and I listened to the Chamber of Commerce. But I like to make up front, I'm only for Army downsizing. Hawaii can afford that. The Army is the smallest piece of the DoD budget. Throw out some numbers. The DoD budget for Hawaii is $14.7 billion. Of that, the Army is the smallest piece, but yet the biggest force. So 1.3 billion is what's thrown around there. Now, even when your opening numbers, you touted the figure of 9 million in GET. That's based on the Army's model that only 208 million gets into Oahu's economy. So this 1.3 means nothing. 208 on the Army model spent on the economy. But now take that 208 to the green and then compare that to what it costs in city services and state services to accommodate 5.1% of the population. In my opinion, when I look at the math, it's $569 million per year for state and city services to accommodate 5% of the population. That's the 50%. I just have this to show that. So what the Chamber of Commerce is touting, it, each one of these chips is $50 million. So 208 million to the good that we get from the Army, but yet look at the expense. $59 million per year. You know, the comparison is, you know, night and day. So it's not 40%. It's most of the people, but not the big ticket makers of the DoD budget. For instance, the Navy and the missile defense and research and development, et cetera. We don't want to lose that. We don't want to lose the Air Force. I am only saying that the Army is best to be in the mainland or somewhere it can deploy from quicker and easier. And for the benefit of the Hawaiian state taxpayers, we save a fortune.
All right, Representative O'Shea, let me give you a chance to come back to that, because as Representative Ng said, for your district, it's something quite different. So are there benefits or perhaps situations beyond the numbers we're throwing around?
Yeah, sure. Most of the businesses of mom and pops that are in the area, North Shore, Wahiawa, Mililani, Waipio, Konea, service the Army or military families there, and they do their shopping, they do their banking, they do their laundering, and they eat out a lot at all the eateries in the area. Along Kamehameha Highway in Wahiawa Town, you have both national chains like McDonald's, Taco Bell, Pizza Hut, Papa John's, Teddy's Burger, Dong Yang. You have all these restaurants. They will immediately feel the effect of any kind of downsizing. Back in 2004, when the 25th Infantry went off to fight in Afghanistan and Iraq, overnight, the Wahiawa businesses felt the effect of their loss. And not only because the soldiers were in town, but also their family members. Because of long-term deployments, family members will leave base and return to their homes or their families on the mainland.
So then let's ask this question. If that housing becomes available and new people move into that housing, will those become the new customers of these local businesses?
That may indeed happen, but right now we're just speculating on what will happen. And you can talk about it even now or later, but we need to look at the operations of the land lease, a 50-year contract, what kind of mortgage obligations they have, what kind of restrictions might be with those rental units at present.
Let's go to the rental units in that question. How does this work? This isn't a case of these homes, if vacated, going magically back to the state to decide what to do with.
Well, unfortunately, because of the 50-year contract that was let with Island Palms in 2005. But the situation the Army has with the private lend-leased development is the situation all 19 states being considered for downsizing. So the Army has to address this with their leaseholders wherever they do the downsizing. And my position is that that inventory is going to hit the Hawaii market no matter what. If the soldiers leave from Hawaii, as I would hope, that's 38,000 family members and soldiers that live in Schofield Barracks and Wheeler. That's housing that would enter our market. And the leaseholder's not going to sit on empty homes, not bringing any income. So somehow the Army and the leaseholder is going to have to negotiate a way to get out of this deal. I don't understand. It's not my kuleana to understand what the 50-year contract contract is, but I'm sure they have a back-out clause for this kind of situation.
But as it stands now, this sort of third party, this other company, would have the say in terms of who might move into these homes.
Well, I'm not sure they have the say. I think the contract has the say because in Fort Bragg, for instance, they have a pecking order of if either there's space available, they can go to retired military and then the civilian community. So I think it's the leaseholders' hands are tied.
Yeah, another component of it too is not only having a tendency of people using those beautiful homes and in those restored dormitories and barracks, but whether or not there are going to be jobs in the area. One of the things we have right now, there are jobs in the area at Schofield Barracks, and I think I've shared it with people that I described it as a job center. There's jobs on base in the area of Schofield and Wheeler Army Airfield. That's a job center. So we're not talking about people moving in to find their job. They're living, where they work and where they reside. So we can have people take on the leases and have those homes there. But where are the jobs for those people? Are they going to be commuting back on the freeway, H1, H2, or are they going to find jobs in and around the community?
Any thought on the job issue?
Yeah, this goes all the way back to the history of Hawaii. I come from a plantation background. If it wasn't for the plantations, my family, my Japanese side, my Chinese, Portuguese side, they wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be here today. But we got reliant. We got reliant on these industries, on these larger powers, and we just every time they pull the plate away from under the table, we say no. You got to keep feeding us, and we got to look beyond that. This resolution that I voted no on, it spoke about safety, as if the Pentagon isn't calling for this to make us a safer nation, as if there was no cross-ideological report from hawks and doves, from Democrats and Republicans that's saying that this is a good idea for the Army, this will keep us safer, as if that didn't happen. The second part of the resolution talked about population, as if we have an underpopulation problem here in Hawaii, as if people don't want to move here, as if a 5% decrease is going to hurt our economy. That's what the resolution was. If it talked about what's next, if the state's saying, we want you to clean up our land, we want to move forward on this turnkey solution to affordable housing. If we're talking about job attrition, then maybe I could have supported that resolution. But we're not looking far enough. We've seen Pioneer Mill close down on Maui and Lahaina, and we're just telling them, please don't, please don't. And what happened is we didn't have a plan ready, and now there's a big dust bowl. We need to stop. We need to squash this plantation mentality. Every new industry we get into is the same situation. I just want to live in Hawaii, where my kids can actually be self-sufficient, chart their own destiny, and be reliant on their own hard work for the first time in the history of Hawaii. And I think that's why we need to start weaning off the military as our number one or number two industry.
You look like you might disagree.
Well, I think we do need to plan for the eventuality. I think the reality that facing Hawaii right now is we no longer have the influence of Senator Inouye. And so we're entering the post-Inouye era in Hawaii, and that's a reality we need to grapple with. And I certainly agree with Representative Ng. We need to always provide for the opportunities of change and diversification. That's been the mantra for forever. So there might be an opportunity here, but at this point in time, unless we know anything more on what's going to happen to the land, whether or not the federal government, through the military branches, is going to provide the money and the commitment for remediation and for securitization of those lands there, I think any kind of change in the status quo might be premature. Because the state of Hawaii right now is not in any shape, form, ready to go in there and manage those lands, clean up those lands, or rehabilitate those lands. And neither is the city and county of Honolulu.
The federal government should. We should demand the federal government to.
I think we should demand that. There's all kind of misuse and use of lands by the military and federal government, and we should demand that they be restored and that monies be put aside for that.
Let's scrap that WrestleMania.
Yeah, we'll do that. We'll do. I commit to that right here. But between getting to that point right now, we need to understand the reality is what's going to happen with these jobs and how we're going to fill these jobs for these people who are currently going to need to transition. And that's all.
And you're right. Like, there's going to be some economic short-term hardships, and I sympathize with the plights of the soldiers and their families. But down the line, if we keep kicking the can down the road, my kids are going to be doing this same argument. And there's environmental costs too. Schofield's Barracks used to be some of the prime agriculture lands, and now they're uncontrolled hazardous waste sites. EPA has them as super funds. Pearl Harbor it's ranked 70.82 on the hazard ranking scale, which is the worst DoD site in the entire nation. And if you use the Subic Bay ratio from the Philippines when they got rid of that base, that's $25 billion that the federal government owes us for Pearl Harbor.
All right, let's go to some questions. From Brandon and Kailua, how many civilian jobs would be lost in Wahiawa? And Mr. Tian, may I ask you, has the DBED looked at job loss and numbers?
According to our number, the civilian jobs in each base in Schofield and the Fort Chapter is about 2,000 each. And the military personnel is about 21,000. So if we are talking about 20,000 cut in the military, I think the wording is including the civilians. So the extreme case will lose about 4,000 civilian jobs.
4,000 jobs. Here's another one from Mike in Hawai'i. What would happen to the schools near the bases? Any thoughts on that?
There's going to be an immediate impact because when you look at student counts every year, you're looking at personnel which are teachers, which are counselors, which are vice principals, which are other staff people. And that's why the Hawaii State Teachers Association came out very strong in supporting the troops at the military bases of Wheeler Milo, Halekula, Solomon. These are all key components of our families and our schools. And for us to see them leave town, it's going to have a drastic impact upon those schools on base. There's also 5 or 6 schools around the area of Schofield and Wheeler Army Airfield. They'll also feel the impact. Nearly 40% of the students that I have at one of my high schools come from base.
Is it possible, though, with the constant demand for housing in Hawaii, that the minute any house became available, new families would be coming in and providing students for those schools?
If those families come with children, children who want to enter into the public schools in the area, we don't know that. Again, so there's a lot of speculation of what kind of tendency you're going to have.
But the rep's looking at that as a half full, or half empty, and I'm looking at half full. Okay. These students that Department of Defense has here, they aren't paying their way. They're only paying $1,500 per year to pay for their education, and I, as a taxpayer, am paying $11,500. Well, so if you take away the students, 28,000 of total DoD, but 11,000 are Army students in your schools that are taking up teachers' time, taking up classroom time, they're overcrowded, and I'm saying they get to disappear, and our student-teacher ratio improves, our facilities get better, we have schools open up.
I'm not advocating for any kids to disappear, though.
No, I'm talking they would go to be relocated to the mainland, and we aren't I don't understand why the DOE is accepting this subsidizing of DoD students in our schools. And
I grew up with the military brats. They're my friends who I played with, grew up with. They added to our quality of life. They gave us a different insight into the world and what's out there beyond our shores, a small little plantation town like Wahiawa. And I think if we lose that as part of our community, we're at a loss. The local community is at a loss. If we lose those students mixing into our classrooms, activities and becoming part of us, I think it's a powerful non-monetized benefit of having students from all over the world, all over the states, spend some time growing up with us. I think you can't not appreciate the benefit we have as locals.
So you're saying that there are benefits beyond the economic?
There are. I mean,
I'm not sure there's $115 million per year worth of benefits, but if that's your position.
Let me go to this question. The down draw is over 5 years. Won't that give us time to develop new ways to support the economy and I suppose find these students and other...
Well, exactly. What I'd hoped for when I started the campaign in July after the Army announcement is I had hoped that our congressmen and representatives would embrace this as an opportunity, and we try to communicate, A, this is a good thing, and B, you may not even win if you go spend all your energy to fight this and try to be the next Senator Inouye, and embrace this instead and go go fight for a transition assistance program, you know, $5 billion program to help out the representatives' businesses and different business, you know, all kinds of people that are affected by this over the next 5 years.
Is that something that's being looked at right now, or is it too early to be looking for opportunities like that?
We don't have a resolution. Our congressional delegation hasn't proposed anything. We got to remember that these cuts come from the budget. Like, it's an act of Congress,
you know,
and it's decisions from the Pentagon that brought us here in the first place. And they're telling us, I mean, you're the only one in the military, I think, out of the four of us, that it's a good idea. And to support the Army is to support the realignment. But we also got to look at the larger picture of the military as a whole. There's thousands of Marines that have been coming in over the last 10 years, and they're continuing to come in. So it's not as drastic as it looks. Like, while we're losing this many, we're getting this many. And yes, I do think 5 years will provide us plenty of time if we plan for it, if we push, if we say, you got to clean this up, you got to help us with the job attrition and the transition. But I have faith that our generation is going to do it, and we're not going to kick the can down the road like the generation before us did.
Oh.
We're a generation, the millennials, who elected presidents, toppled dictators.
Yeah, I don't want what generation we're talking about here tonight, but I think the fact of the matter is that, yeah, I think the congressional delegation will have to do the best they can to weigh in. This is a budget-driven decision that came from the Budget Control Act in 2011. This was not something that was thought about as the right thing to do on all the departments, all the federal expenditures. That's what's going on right now. Sequestration is basically across-the-board cuts. You guys figure it out. You guys make it work. And that's one thing that Congress has done going back to 2011. So we need to understand that. It's a fiscal tool that's been handed off in a blunt format to all the states and all the departments and all the programs. And we need to adjust to that reality. I think there is time for us to come together and look at the future and devise a strategy and plan and look at different scenarios and opportunities that maybe this downsizing has for us. And I think we'll have that commitment. You know, so I think
we should do that now.
I think representation. We will do it now. We will do it now. I think we can start it now, moving forward. There's some time, because I think at some point in time there will be some decrease in the number of troop strength with the military, and maybe in particular the Army. There is a House bill that, I put in one, Conley, just so you know, House Bill 323, and that's geared to address, in your department, DBED's department, to address the impact upon businesses. And it's similar to what we did back in 2004 when we had a massive 10,000 troops deploying to Afghanistan and Iraq. We set up that fund just as a contingency for the affected businesses. We can do the same thing this year.
State funds that would be available to businesses that were affected.
It's similar to any kind of massive plant closing. Whether it's a plantation, whether it's Aloha Airlines, whether it's Weyerhaeuser, whether it's Maui Land and Pine. You need to provide assistance from the public coffers to assist these affected communities and businesses.
It seems like, although you two are on different sides of this issue, you're both at the point where you're saying it might be time to just stop saying no, don't leave, and start thinking about, all right, if you do leave, what do we need to do? Would you agree?
I always believe in this. Hope for the best. Prepare for the worst.
Yeah, and it's time to start looking ahead in those.
Yeah.
Let's go to a few more questions. This is a question from Kaneohe. Why are only 19 states targeted for downsizing? What about the other 31 states?
Well, I guess I get that one. Well, the Army looked at where their big bases were, and this happens to be 19 states, so it's just the math, how that works out. But if you compare Hawaii and people that say, oh, it's strategic, we're at the tip of the spear, there are bases on the continental United States that are on the cut list that are absolutely top tier, deploying U.S. the nation's #1 assets. Fort Bragg is on the list. Fort Hood is on the list. Even Joint Base Lewis McChord. We can't lose those, but they're on the list. So that's why I'm saying that Hawaii is such an easy target.
Right. And would it be fair to say potentially there are bases in other states that might have more political power because they're larger states in Washington to stop a closure?
And that's why I wish our delegation wasn't trying to be the next senator Inouye and was doing what the representatives are talking about, and that's fight for a transition plan.
Here's a question that relates to that. With the loss of Dan Inouye's influence, is it possible that this is just the first move of a future with fewer federal monies coming to Hawaii? Is this the first of sort of a wave of these type of actions, perhaps?
We need to be realistic. Like Senator Inouye, he's a hero. He's a role model of mine. I think he did what he thought was best for the state, and it's like jolts, this federal money into our economy is like caffeine, but at a certain point when you're dependent on it and you stopped eating a balanced diet and you're dependent on coffee for energy, you gotta start weaning off of the stuff. And you're gonna have some headaches in the short term, you're gonna have some withdrawals, but it's necessary to wean off and start eating better. And I think that's what we need to start doing.
All right, tonight we're talking about how Hawaii's economy could survive a possible military downsizing. We encourage our viewers to join the discussion by calling, emailing, or tweeting questions and comments. Call 973-1000 on Oahu and 800-283-4847 from the neighbor islands. Speaking of the future, Mr. Tian, has DBED done any studies looking to Hawaii's economic future, both with and without the military?
Yeah, we haven't done any analysis in this area. So we did some study on the sequestration. In the last 3 years, especially from 2012, 13 and 14, we do see that the military personnel, active duty personnel, actually increase. Currently, the active duty military personnel is about 50,000. So it's actually the highest level since World War II. And we do see the shifting between the Army and Navy. So we have some increase in the Navy active duty.
Which you were referencing earlier.
Actually, the Army population, the Army personnel also increased if you look at it historically. So we didn't feel too significant impact from the sequestration. You can see by the other economic indicators, looking at the employment, we do see we lost about 900 civilian jobs, the shipyard jobs. But I think the Department of Defense is hiring them back. So we have seen there's 100 jobs increase just in December this last year.
So any thoughts on what we could do to stimulate our economy in this situation?
We need to find some alternatives. I think it is because of, when we talk about economics, there is a term called comparative advantage. The comparative advantage means that you spend very little, very minimum cost, then you receive the maximum benefit. So I think the two areas, one is tourism, and we don't need to do too much, the visitors coming. It's because we have the climate, we have the aloha spirit, we have some other infrastructures, and military is another because of the strategic location. And but during the last 3 years, we didn't see a significant impact in the economy. So I feel that I still hope, from my personal, the cut is only a discussion.
All right. This question relates to what we're talking about right now from Chuck and Kaneo here. Regarding businesses coming in as military leaves, Hawaii is consistently ranked as one of the worst states in which to run a business. Where are these businesses going to come from? How do you replace the $1.5 billion that's going to be lost? Representative Oshiro, since your district in particular, it's a business worry, have you had any thoughts, or have there been discussions on what could we do to help the economy in your area?
Well, one of the things we're doing right now north of Wahiawa is to make north of Wahiawa as a breadbasket for Oahu. We saved some of the most precious ag lands there, partly due to partnerships with the military buffer program. So everything back from Waimea Bay, Pupakea Pamalu, out to Kahuku, Turtle Bay, up through the Drum Road, to Helemano, to the Birthing Stones, Kukane Local, Galbraith Lands, all of that in partnership with the United States military, in particular the Army, has allowed us to preserve some of the best ag lands on the island of Oahu. And so we're hoping to develop the breadbasket of Oahu in this area, and that might create some jobs. But as far as the other types of jobs that Representative Ng is talking about, there might be opportunities in and about the base, because of the footprint and the infrastructure that will remain. And they have an airfield there, Wheeler Army Airfield. That's probably the only workable, available airfield should any of the airports around the island of Oahu get affected from tsunami or global warming. That's going to be a touch place we have there. They also have the state-of-the-art wastewater plant right now that by Aqua Engineering from Kauai has the top state-of-the-art water purification system, wastewater system there. And we have some of the best LEED standard homes up there, both for water, utility, and conservation and landscaping. So these are all assets that could be taken from military use to civilian or dual use.
Potentially exciting. Perhaps that relates to this question. If they shrink these Army bases, can these lands be returned to our communities for some of the uses you've talked about? Colonel, could you explain how that would work?
Well, it has to go through a base realignment and closure procedures with the Congress after the downsizing occurs. So there's an official legal process and guidance provided to the Department of the Army of how to do, what procedures to take. But in essence, the assets will first be offered up as surplus to the federal government. And the federal government who isn't there now, will probably not choose to take any facilities or assets. And then the state is next in line. So we have an opportunity to acquire 2 brand new turnkey cities with the infrastructure and the quality and the maintenance level that just imagine this is one case where what they say, if you build it they will come. Well, it's already built. So imagine the industrial and retail opportunities that would be up there.
And of course, there are some complications, as we spoke of earlier. There's a rental company involved, Island Palm, I believe.
And that's just with the housing, though.
Right.
There's tons of offices and industrial facilities and retail stores, and there's a $1 billion secondary access road for my friends in the Leeward Coast.
Which would be exciting, this is true. Representative Ng, can the Superfund sites start the cleanup process now?
The sooner the better. But as long as we're begging them for them to stay, that's never going to start. Like, they're going to have to clear the area first. And I mean, this is some of the most hazardous areas in the nation. And it used to be prime agricultural land for Hawaii. And these are costs that I don't know if you guys consider that in your study, but that adds up to millions of dollars. And when we're talking about comparative advantage, that doesn't mean that we need to be better than the other guy. It means we need to be the best at it compared to anything else that we can do. But we've been so reliant on just tourism and military that we're not even exploring enough. Like, we don't even know where we're the most productive anymore because there's not enough new industries that even have a chance. And we try to get these new industries going. We talk a big game about diversifying our economy, and we give tax credits to film and tech while we're holding on to this. And that's not going to happen. You're going to have to see sunset to see sunrise. If you want new industries to blossom, unfortunately, we're going to have to take these short-term hits. And I sympathize with these people, but we can't kick the can down the road. In terms of new industries, who knows? Like, who knew Facebook would be billions of dollars like 20 years ago? No one. Like Uber, Airbnb, we're redefine what employment even is, our generation. I think we need to just have hope that young leaders will step up and figure it out and not keep kicking the can down the road to the next generation.
All right, from Mike in Mililani, it sounds like an either-or situation with the military at Fort Shafter or Schofield. Is it possible that the downsizing might be something in between, like maybe only 1/3? And maybe I can add to that, does that make this much more complicated because some of those common resources that you guys are talking about as potential business?
I think it's very complicated. I think we can't oversimplify it. There could be, anywhere less, 20,000. It could be 10,000. It could be 5,000. We don't know. It's a budget-driven decision that will have to be made by those in DC. But I think in any case, we need to prepare for different scenarios, whether it's all 20,000 or it's 10,000. And what industries or what businesses are going to replace those jobs there that employ local people. And those jobs there from the military personnel side are well over the average salaries of the demographic in that area. I think it's 65,000 north for those professional types of jobs that the Army provides to civilian employees. And it's not only the civilian employees working as federalized employees, but the private contractors, engineers, architects, researchers, scientists. Those are all top-notch jobs for the younger folks, of maybe Mr. Ng's generation, who want to come home and get those jobs. We're going to lose those opportunities. And so I think the transition, if it needs to be made, let's make it, in a rational manner. Let's not just, clear house and, have them leave town, but make sure we have something there to fill the vacuum, fill the void, so we can keep those people employed and keep them bringing them back from the mainland.
Can I jump in on this? Because it's a great question. What if it's a partial downsize? And that's what our congressional delegation is going to try to do, is negotiate some deal so they come back and say, hey, look what we did. We saved the day. Unfortunately, they won't have saved the day. While the costs will go down, the income will go down, but here's the kicker. The kicker is if not all 20,000 leave Oahu, we will not, and this is what I call the worst case scenario, we will not acquire Schofield Barracks and Wheeler Army Airfield. They will not be declared surplus. So we'll still have the Army occupying their current lands, and we'll just have a smaller force here. That would be a shame.
So in other words, the politics might lead our congressional delegation to want to sort of salvage something, but that's actually not in Hawaii's best interest.
And I'm trying to communicate that to them, but I don't want them to try to compete to be the next senator in a way, because it's going to backfire on us.
Your thoughts on that?
I don't understand it's all or nothing. I don't understand, have the background of the colonel here, but let's say that they did downsize by 10,000, they still retain usage of the Schofield's Wheeler lands. There are opportunities there. There's a state-of-the-art wastewater treatment plant. We have the only accessible airstrip on the island. They're building a backup power plant that can help kickstart the grid should we need it. These are all assets that are brought to the community by the United States Army. They also do a heck of a job in some of the areas of protecting our most fragile areas along the island, along the ridges, along the trails. And I think the Army spends more money in the state of Hawaii, Department of Land and Natural Resources, on preservation of natural resources in our forest lands and preservation conservation lands. They spend more money than we do from the state side on protecting our most precious lands.
Any thoughts on that?
What are we talking about again?
In terms of the Army?
Partial downsizing.
And also in terms of the Army spending more money, apparently, which I did not know, than Department of Land and Natural Resources protecting our forest. And
Sorry, I got lost.
No, that's all right. There's a lot being talked about. Do you think the benefit of the Army gives in terms of protecting our natural resources outweighs some of the damage?
Well, I mean, let's be real. Like, these are some of the most prime ag lands in the nation, and now they're the most hazardous. Sure, they can help us here or there, and I'm very grateful for that. But civil service, like, we're probably still going to have a lot of National Guard folks. Like, those aren't.
No, that's going to be impacted. I think that's what people need to understand. If the Army moves out and they take their training equipment and technologies and hardware, there are not going to be the means for our own local and National Guard to train. So they're going to be ill prepared for the next deployment. And I don't. And that's a big concern we have.
Yeah.
And that's going to ripple through all the citizen soldiers we have in our community. They will not have the ability. And I think, Colonel, you can.
Well, this is just as they are today, though. That situation exists today, especially with the active Army. We have 2 brigades up at Schofield that aren't combat ready because they can't do combined arms live fire at the company level. And it's a disservice to put soldiers up in central Oahu, isolated from training and deployment assets, for the benefit of corporate welfare.
All right. Mr. Tian, can you give us an idea of how the state would be impacted, not just specifically Wahiawa, and are there other industries that could step in to replace the military spending?
And that's a good question, but it's a difficult one. I think the military, when we look at the economy, I think there is the importance is the export component of the industry. Export component means that every dollar coming from out of state will go to our GDP. So the money coming to the military is, from Hawaii standard, is export. And also those military, when they are here, they will attract more visitors from out of state. And those visitors coming to the state, they spend money in the state, is also counted as export. So there is a ripple effect. The military is actually linked with other industries like military and tourism and some other sectors. The local businesses serve the military. So the state actually have been doing diversification, and we actually have seen the impact of the diversification. You see that tourism, although it is a number one industry, but it used to be 33%, 1/3 of the economy. Currently is about 17%. So the military now is about, Department of Defense is about 11%. But we're not talking about the whole 11% that will be going. So the local economy, what will be the replacement for this loss? I think that is up to the policymakers.
Yeah. Well, it's not. It's up to the free market. Yeah. It really is. And we don't know what to expect, just like we didn't see Facebook coming or Uber coming. Like, we don't know this, but something will come. That's basic economics. It's opportunity cost, too, that we're not talking about. All this billions of dollars, like, it could be something else. And let's face the facts. I think all of us on the table agree that no military installation is permanent, nor should it be. I don't think any of us want that, and we're going to have to figure out what's next.
From Roger in Kaka'ako, many small businesses are being displaced by rail, and they have no place to go. Why not put them on the basis? Any thoughts in terms of transplanting businesses out? Of course, you've got a different geographic makeup than you do downtown.
Well, there might be opportunities there, but again, businesses are going to go where the customers are, where they can make a sale. So if they can find the customers and make a sale, they'll come up to Schofield.
All right. If sequestration continues, couldn't Hawaii lose more than 20,000 positions? If cost cutting in Washington continues, could we look at something much wider than what we're talking about now?
Okay, first of all, regarding the Department of Defense, people will miscategorize this as a sequestration or budget control issue. It really isn't. The Quadrennial Defense Review, which was published early in this year, changed the mission of the Defense Department from fighting 2 major theater wars to now only 1. That's a marked difference in the forces you need to fight that mission. So the Army cuts are based on that mission change. Now, so they've been tasked to pay the lion's share of the budget of the cuts with that mission change. If sequestration occurs, the Army will incur 30,000 more. The Navy will lose 1 carrier, and the Air Force will lose 80 aircraft. So that's a worst case scenario, and I think that's all we'll see in Hawaii. And we won't even see the carrier piece, and we won't see the aircraft piece. So Hawaii is only going to take the hit this one time, which is why I'm saying for the congressional delegates, embrace this, but use this as leverage with your colleagues in Congress and say, we'll bite the bullet on this one, but you're not coming for our Air Force, Marines, or our Navy. And
safeguard those. And
right.
You agree with that?
Yeah, I think maybe Marcus could too.
Would you agree to use this as leverage if needed?
Well, I don't know what the politics look like for our congressional delegation, but these are hard choices. These are not easy choices, and this is the unknown future that we're all banking on. It's going to be positive. I think that's why we need to go, but go slow.
All right. Another question. Are all the soldiers likely to leave around the same time, or will it be staggered to mitigate the impact?
No, it'll be done as kindly as possible over a 4-year period. So look to this fall or winter for an announcement by the Army, and then the mechanism will go into motion to downsize between now and 2019. That's a long time. So a lot of soldiers will retire. Some will just decide to get out. Some will be offered early retirement, and some who aren't competitive, unfortunately, are going to be let go. But virtually all of these soldiers will migrate back to the continental United States, and we won't even notice their departure.
All right. Representative Ng, let me direct this to you from Dana and Eva. Are there military entities on the other islands? Do they have similar infrastructure, and what is the economic impact, not just on Oahu?
There's 161 military installations throughout our state, 5.7% of our total landmass in Hawaii, but it's 22.4% of the Oahu landmass, so it's much, much smaller on the other islands. it doesn't mean it doesn't exist, and it doesn't mean that there's equally complicated histories like Pohaku Loa, for example, with live fire training that's still happening. In Ni'ihau, there's missile testing going on the reefs, right alongside the island, and there's costs associated to that as well. And I think we keep talking about this economic argument, and of course that's important. But I think everyone of us on the table, we want an economy like based on peace. We want peace in the world, right? But when our livelihoods depend on war and suffering from people's overseas, that's not something we want to do forever. We obviously want to move away from that. There's a great piece by Kara Jabola that was on the Community Voices in Civil Beat.
I read it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Mahal, I love you, I'm sorry. And I think that talks a lot about this moral issue as when are we gonna move away from this, from advocating for that type of pain and war and suffering throughout the world.
All right, regarding military land being returned for Hawaii's use, what are we doing with Barbers Point Air Station?
Okay, well, that is often the excuse used by many to say, oh, we shouldn't do this because we'll just screw that up. The state can't handle the responsibility of the transfer. First of all, it's apples and oranges. That's a Navy facility. I don't like the way the Navy turned over that facility, and more importantly, the state accepted it. They accepted it in the condition it is. They did not have to do that. That's their failure. The state shouldn't have to bear any financial burden for what they acquired in Barbers Point. Unfortunately, they messed that up. So the transition of Schofield and Wheeler is going to be managed by the Army Corps of Engineers, local politicians and citizens that are going to do it the right way and make sure everything is cleaned up and transitioned over a period of time. It's going to take, so the state wanted to do Barbers Point overnight and outsource it and turn their back on it. It'll take 30 to 40 years to do this transition properly.
Do you think Barbers Point is a reason to have some concern?
I think so. I think that's Exhibit A for what not to do, or to make sure that you have the federal resources or the commitment from the state or local authorities to use the land appropriately for housing, for commercial development, and for economic diversification. To see it the way it is right now, it is what it is, right?
All right. Mr. Tian, let me direct this question to you. In a 9/11 environment, would Hawaii's economy have survived with 50,000 fewer military and dependents? In other words, should we see a catastrophic drop-off of tourism for a certain period of time? Without the military, could we get through it? And of course, we're not talking about a total absence of military. We're talking about the potential absence of some. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think what we call these external shocks, like the 9/11, like the earthquake, those kind of things, that will impact our tourism. Mainly is the economy impacted through tourism. But our experience is that our economy will recover pretty quickly. I think other than this most recent depression, the Great recession, I think the economy usually recovered in terms of tourism is about within 3 months or half year is recovered, and it will going to continue to go up. For this military, if we look at the impact, because this is according to the information I have, is going to be not all at one time. It's going to be slowly.
Staggered.
Yeah, it will be taking a time. I think our people maybe by that time may be ready to do something else.
Yeah, I think Professor Bannister from HPU basically explained it's going to be a dramatic change in all of those communities affected by it. And there is not today any replacement economic driver or activity to fill that void. And I think that's the scariest thing for those communities, all the way from H2 all the way up through and including Haleiwa town. So there's a lot of people out there who are going to be affected by it. And I think that's the scary thing for those communities.
Let's get to this question, or rather comment. Downsizing the military here would be of great benefit in terms of freeing up needed housing, getting more cars off the road. Any civilian job losses can be made up by the local economy. This caller brings up the issue of traffic. Could we see an alleviation of some traffic, or do most military personnel live either on base or close enough to base that that wouldn't be a major factor?
They live in Wahiawa, they live on the North Shore in Mokuleia, Wailua, Haleiwa, in Mililani, Mauka, Waikele, Pearl City, Aiea. You know, they're a short 10, 15-minute drive to the base to work. You know, they go into our local public schools. So
yeah, so traffic mitigation.
Yeah.
This might be our last question. What will the reaction be to our partner nations, Philippines, Taiwan, etc., when 30,000 troops are pulled out of Hawaii? Is there a security issue for Hawaii? Colonel.
Well, people will use that as an excuse not to move forces out of Hawaii, but again, this isn't a strategic location. If this was a strategic location, the Defense Logistics Agency would be stockpiling supplies here, and they don't. They stockpile them on the West Coast and the East Coast. So this isn't where you deploy from. Our allies, they know that we're going to be there when they need us, and we can get to them quicker from the West Coast than we can from Hawaii.
Maybe a very quick response from you. Any thoughts on that, briefly?
I think it's going to send a wrong message right now that here, when we're tilting to the east, to Asia, and everything going on in China, India, and Korea, I don't think it sends the right message.
Representative, very quickly.
I don't know better than the Pentagon does. If this is what they want for our safety, then I'm going to trust them. I really like this discussion. I think all these voices are needed. You know, if I was in Wahiawa, it'd be devastating to it. But we do need elected official thinking beyond the next 2 years, and the community's not unanimous. So I'm the young guy, and it's also the cultural history, the moral argument, not just economic, and you know, from Kaho'olawe to everything. Like, there's so much emotions in this issue that we can't address. It's beyond the realm of this discussion. But you know, I'm glad we had this. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Next time on Insights, the city and transit proponents believe Oahu's upcoming rail line will be more successful if new homes, shops, and offices are developed near the train stations. Some see transit-oriented development as an opportunity to create more affordable housing, as well as green, walkable, middle-class communities. But others are concerned about the cost and the negative impacts development could have on the environment and cultural sites. Will transit-oriented development work in Hawaii? That's next time on Insights on PBS Hawaii. I'm Malia Mattoch. A hui hou.